Size Business.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Snack-Sized Business. I'm LB Adams, of course, and I'm your host, and it is my joy and my job to amplify the voices and work of women who are in business, who are business owners, who are entrepreneurs, or who are driving industry in a positive and impactful way. And so today on the show, I have a very interesting guest. Her name is Shoshanna French. She is the founder of Simple Spirit, which is an intuition-based business planning organization. I'll let her really tell you more about it. But first, let me give you Shoshanna's 5 biographical facts. Okay, so number 1 is she is a singer and she's performed in front of over 5,000 people. Number 2, she says she hears and sees dead people, but doesn't like talking to them. So we definitely need to find out more about that. Number 3, she says she is most proud of her relationship with her husband, that she has a remarkable relationship with him. She loves to read, not just good books, but trashy novels too. And then number 5, she says she loves the ocean, but hates the smell of fish, and that it actually kind of makes her gag. So I'm not quite sure if it's, the fish on shore or cooking fish. I'm not quite sure about that. But there you go. Shoshanna French, her 5 biographical facts, and I can't wait to share this conversation with you. Hello and welcome to Snack-Sized Business, Shoshanna French. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm excited the 2 conversations we've had have been so juicy that I was like, oh yes, let's do this again.
Juicy. I love juicy. Okay, so I have to start out of the gate. I would love for you to describe who you are and what your business is, because I don't know that I did a good job of that. And so I want people to understand that from you.
Perfect. So my business. So I train people how to practically apply intuition. And intuition, specifically intuitive decision making, meaning using intuition practically to navigate decisions, relationships, connections. It's useful to say I define intuition as a direct way of knowing or understanding something without any prior experience or education. So I train people how to trust that little voice in our head, that little sense in our belly that's like yes or no, or those big ideas that come that we're like, I could never do that. I better just put that back in the box. But like, instead I tell people, don't ignore that. That's your intuition. Go with that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I think makes it much more clear. All right. So before I jump into our 3 questions, I am dying, forgive the pun rather, I'm dying to hear more about, you say you hear and see dead people, but you don't like talking to them. Can you share a little bit more about that?
So I didn't even know that this was a thing until I was in college and I went on a first date and we went back to their apartment. And when we got into the apartment, it had like when places have creepy vibes.
Yes.
Like their apartment itself didn't have a creepy vibe. They didn't have a creepy vibe, but like the building had a creepy vibe. And so I went up into the apartment, they had made dinner, we sat down, we had dinner, and I went into the bathroom to put on my game face, like, we got this, because I was really nervous because I really liked this person. And when I closed my eyes facing the mirror in their bathroom, full on image in my head of someone killing themselves. And I was like, what's going on? I am crazy. And my heart was like racing and I was like sweating profusely. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And then I just started to get really, really nauseous, sick, and sat down at the dinner table, started eating, got more and more sick the longer I was there. And then I was like, I have to go. So I ran out, like the hounds of hell were on my feet, and I just ran out. And then maybe a week later, I was asking someone and telling them about this place. And they go, they called it a something house. I don't remember what the word was, but it was like, it had a name because it used to be a place where people, it was like a halfway house for people coming out of rehab who had mental illness. And so when I told them the story of what I saw, they're like, oh yeah, I'm sure you probably just saw the person who killed themselves in that. And I was like, what? And so then that kind of started this thing where I was like, is that real? I mean, there's other stuff in the world of intuition I had experienced, but like that thing, is that real? That's weird. And then I was like, are ghosts real? And it kind of started me on this whole thing where I started to trust when I felt creepy vibes or when I had like that feeling. And then, and so now I can go all kinds of places, and there are always ghosts and people who've died just about everywhere. In some places, there's more of a concentration of them. And
sure,
I mean, everybody has experienced, like if anybody's ever been to Alcatraz in San Francisco, you go to that rock and there's something about that place. It feels haunted. And so there's a reason for that. But I am more sensitive, so I can go to places that don't seem obviously haunted and I get a vibe. So what I mean when I say I don't like to talk to them is when I would do session work as a coach with people and like their grandfather or their brother or the whomever, and they would, would like show up in the conversation, I'd be like, not doing that. Sorry. They need to go to a medium for that. I'm not a medium. I'm not doing, no, not today. And so it's less to do with the people who've passed and more to do with the people in front of me, which is that that's trafficking and a lot of grief and a lot of sadness. And I'm a sponge anyway. And it's hard. It's hard work. Anybody who does hospice would know about that. A nurse or people who work with people who are terminally ill. It's not dissimilar in that regard. It's just it's hard. It's heart heavy. And so that's really why I don't like to talk to them or do it. Not because it creeps me out.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I understand and believe that energy doesn't end, right? And so like it transitions in ways that perhaps we can't understand. But this is not a conversation about ghosts, but that was fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I thought for sure you were going to say, so I went on this date and we saw this movie, and that's how I learned I saw dead people. Took a hard ride though. Okay,
that would have been a cooler story though.
All right. So let me ask you our first real question. What conversation do you wish that you'd had, but you did not?
There's a few, but one that like comes to mind right now with me is my grandmother, my mom's mom. I called them both grandmother, both my paternal and maternal grandmothers. But my mom's mom was like a pioneer in that she went to school, became a nurse, but then she also traveled all over the world with my mom and her siblings while my grandfather worked for a big company. And I would have loved, my grandfather told his stories a lot, but she didn't tell her stories. And so I would have loved to have the conversation where, like, what was that like to grow up with, the family you did at the time that you did, to then be all over the world and, be on your own? Because that's kind of how it was for her. She was on her own while my grandfather worked for Hughes Aircraft and was working he was an electrical engineer. And so that I would have loved to have that conversation with her. A few different reasons, because for one, she was so brilliant and what was available to women at that time was way less, but she could have been a doctor, honestly. She was that brilliant, but in her family, like even becoming a nurse was a big deal. She came from a family of like teachers and, the typical kind of female, oriented.
Right. Like there were four things that women could do. You could birth babies, you could become a nurse, a teacher,
or a secretary.
Or a secretary. That's it. I was trying to think of that. That was it. That was the scope of it.
Yeah. So I know that she, and part of that conversation would have been like, although she didn't call it intuition, like how did that influence what you did? Because they were all over the world she had no prior experience traveling, and they were in places like Thailand and India, and she was with 3 children, and she just did it. And I'm like, well, how did intuition influence her in that and like navigating people? Because I watched her with people and could tell that she was intuiting and understanding people at a much deeper and more profound level that was beyond just simple, intellect and being able to read people well. I mean, she was, anyway, that's a conversation I would have loved to have. Because she influenced me in such big ways. She was definitely a lady, like the lotion on the hands and the elbows every night before she went to bed, the cold cream on her face.
Yes.
And
Yes. Oh, that's terrific, Shoshanna. Thank you for sharing that. You're not the first guest who has talked about wanting to have talked to a loved one who's passed, but that's a really interesting, and I like your approach or your why you would want to talk to her. I love that. So thank you. All right. So second question, and then I'm going to go back to your biographicals for a moment, but let me ask you this. What do you love about what you do?
What do I not love about what I do?
What lights you up? What lights you up the most, the biggest about what you're doing right now?
It's all so good.
I love a good one.
I feel like I have to say it on 2 levels. So on a very personal level, what like gets me super juiced up is helping people. Because I mean, that's core to who I am. I love helping people, specifically not rescuing or fixing people or changing them, but like helping them, being a support where they learn to lean on their own gifts and their own power. And then from there, really,
That's an interesting differentiation. I like that.
Yeah. When people hear the word help, I think sometimes it can either sound like I'm martyring the people I'm helping or I'm martyring myself to help people.
Right.
And it's not either one of those things. So, and then on a more, not altruistic, but like a bigger kind of meta level, for me, the thing I love about what I do is every single person who I work with, whether I meet them when I speak or they're in a class I'm teaching or I work with them one-on-one, when they make that shift from like using logic, linear thinking, experience, and like kind of putting the what's possible for them outside of themselves, when they switch from that kind of mindset to that like trusting themselves, and then it doesn't stop with them, because then when they make a decision that's based on intuition and someone goes, how did you know that? And they're like, this is going to sound weird, but intuition. And it's not even, this is what I mean by meta. Like, it's not about them giving me credit, because it's something that everybody has inside of them already. I'm not teaching them something they don't know. I'm reminding them and then helping them free away all the boundaries where they can trust themselves. When people do that, that lights me up. That lights me up. When people start really trusting themselves, it's freaking magical. It's magical.
Oh gosh, I understand that feeling that you're talking about. I love that. Well, thank you. Okay, so let me circle back here. So let's talk about your love-hate relationship with the ocean for a quick minute. I didn't quite understand this. So you love the ocean, but hate the smell of fish. So when you're at the shore, you don't actually smell the fish. So you have to elaborate a little on that.
Okay, so it's not, someone was correcting me the other day. It's actually the smell of rotting seaweed. That's what I associate with the smell.
That smell, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but it's a very, very salty smell. So like, as an example, people who love the ocean like I do and love fish, they really like, oh my God, have you ever had sea urchin? And I've had all this, like, they have all these delicacies and I'm like, ew, that tastes like the ocean smells, and I don't want the ocean in my mouth.
Yes.
That's what I mean, is like the smell of like that super salty kind of like, but I love it. I love being by water. I love being in it. I love being on it. I love just being near it. Like, I love the ocean. And I grew up in Colorado, but for like a little short 4-year period, I lived in Whittier, which is a suburb of LA, Greater LA. And we went to the ocean at least twice a month, if not more often. And I learned how to swim in the water, in the ocean. And so I just have this like deep love and appreciation for how tiny it makes you compared to like everything else it has. Nature does that in general. But yeah, that like when you get that first mouthful of seawater, you're like, that's nasty. And then anything, like anytime I'm in like a really beautiful, like open air, or even like a grocery store that has a huge fish section and I walk past it, I'm like,
yeah. I understand. Well, that clarifies a lot because I totally understand what you mean about the smell of the rotting seaweed. Yes, just 1,000 times yes. I totally get that. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
No problem. I'm like, I think the like question that prompted that was something like, what's a weird thing about you? I'm like, that's a weird thing. I literally love the ocean, but do not make me smell ocean. Like I don't want to. Like all the fake oceany smells.
Very particular. It's very particular. And it's only in certain parts of it. Like, we're in Charleston. I'm in Charleston. And there are certain parts with like the marshes that have that smell to it. And I absolutely understand what you're saying. Okay. Third and final question, my friend. What communication advice do you live by?
It's literally this, which is that that everything can be worked out in communication, but that communication isn't what you think it is. So
okay, can you say more words?
Yeah, I'll say more words. I was trying to make it like what would go on like a fortune cookie. I lived by. So mostly people think communication is related to like I need to become fluent in a particular vernacular or jargon so I can communicate to people, but powerful communication is more about speaking into the listening. So it's to me, it's like when they take, for example, Shakespeare plays and they put them in modern times, they do that because it speaks to a new audience. And then the brilliance of the drama or the comedy of, like Midsummer's Night's Dream comes alive for people who have never heard people speak like that. And that language doesn't translate. So to me, that's the, like, everything is work outable in communication, and it's only when you speak into the listening. And so what I mean by that, mostly for me, how that looks like in my life is when I notice that I'm having someone who's difficult, really difficult, I can source almost always that the difficulty or the miscommunication, the source of it is over here with me. So I'm either I'm saying what I need to say to them, but knowing that they will never be able to hear what I'm saying, because some people can't hear what you're saying because it doesn't jive with what they believe to be true.
That's so well said. Yeah, I agree. That's so well said.
And sometimes I try to adjust my speaking for their listening, but like sometimes people aren't ready to hear stuff. Like they're just not in a place to hear what it is I have to say. And so, I'm not a believer in like shut down your emotions and don't say what you need to say, but I am a believer in like personal responsibility to not, if you find that somebody is like I love my dad, but he's my difficult person in the world. Right. And he's someone that consistently, no matter what I say, he can't hear me. So if I pretend that this one time I'm going to say the thing and then he's going to hear it, that's ridiculous. Like, come on. Like if I'm like setting myself up to be upset and have a miscommunication. Yes. If I think in this time when I speak to him, he's going to be in my listening. No, he's never going to be in my listening. He's in his listening. So I either can communicate to his listening or I can not talk to him. And those are kind of like my two options. And sometimes I often choose that second one. I just don't communicate with him a lot, because then he doesn't get upset and I don't get upset. Like, why would I intentionally over and over again?
There's a lot to be said for that.
Heck yeah, there is. Heck yeah. Yeah. It's like, and it goes for all things in life. But if you have something that your heart is wanting you to share with the world and you've been doing it and literally no one's getting it, it probably isn't that your thing isn't valuable to be shared. It's the wrong freaking audience. Like you're telling the wrong people, because it matters who's listening, like that's communication is both in the speaking, but it's less speaking. It's more about listening. Right. So that's the communication adage I live by.
Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff. I love it. It's good stuff. Really good stuff. So what I want to know on the way out the door is what, I know you love to read and you read trashy stuff as well as good stuff. So tell me what you're reading right now.
I just finished a book and it was called Billionaire Bad Boys. It was like a series of 4, and that was the trashy romance novel that I was reading, Billionaire Bad Boys Club. Okay, this is humiliating to admit, but I like trashy, like super raunchy romance novels. And I also like to read stuff that is like impactful. So a book that I've been working my way through is The Body Keeps Score. So like I keep it balanced. I'm reading that book
this week who said that book to me.
It is an interesting book. It is not easy to get through because if you have any big T or little t trauma in your life, then you find yourself going, oh my goodness, where is my body kept score about that thing that happened? And it makes you really curious, and you need a moment to integrate and think and like process, and then you go back to the book. So I've been reading that book for 4 months.
Well, Shoshanna, thank you so much for your time and a good laugh and some really interesting intuition. I absolutely appreciate it. Thank you.